What's up, everybody? Hi, Jason from G Alpha Designs. So I've been wanting to do this video for, well, shortly before the whole quarantine thing happened, and I'd kind of been hoping it was not going to last as long as it has, as I'm sure everybody more than feels. But I wanted to go through my comm wiring that I use on tour. It is overcomplicated in the way that I do. But I just kind of wanted to share it. I wanted to share it while it was in Iraq, but I don't see a reason I can't do it with the individual components sticking up. So before I dive into just how it's all put together, I just kind of wanted to go through why it's put together the way that it is. So the original need was that I needed to start recording my comm feeds. I was having some issues with management on a tour, and partly I needed to be able to prove that certain spot calls were happening in venues where we might not have had the most responsive spot ops. And it was also for my own sake, so that I could review the spot calls that I was making and see if maybe something I said was not having the effect I needed it to. I could review it, listen to it in a less stressful, less fast-paced setting, and address it, figure out how I would want to rephrase that in the future. So that was all being fed through Reaper, and I was making markers in the file, and I'm going to go through all that later in the video. But so anyways, it became handy for that, became handy for making verbal notes during the show, so I'm not also trying to write things down while pushing buttons. And then it also developed into an issue of live practicality. A lot of venues, especially some arenas, you got 300 feet of comm cable just in your snake. Then from the snake, you're patching into the wall system. From the wall system, it's going all the way up to the grid, all the way back to the spot ops, at which point you've got 600 to 800 feet of comm cable. And an issue I was commonly running into was that in order for me to hear what they're saying, if they needed to reach back to me, I had to be blasting my own ears out with my own voice, and vice versa. They couldn't hear me at all in relation to themselves. So I wanted a way to boost my volume to the spot ops. There were also, what else was it? I think that was actually pretty much it. I was also trying to integrate my ears and my comm feed together. I already had JH ears. I didn't want to drop the cash on Ultimate ears just so I could use their fancy injection system, so I just figured I'd make my own. All in all of the gear that went into this was like $1,200, so it's not exactly the cheapest thing to put together. I'm sure there's probably a cheaper, more effective way to put it together, but I just wanted to make something work. With all that said, again, between recording and wanting to blend a bunch of sources together, I forgot to mention radio and that. That was the reasoning behind this. So with all that said, I'm going to go through how it's built. Alright, so let's get into the gear that was used here. For my headset, I purchased this Shure headset, BRH, whatever the hell the model number is. I wanted something that was a stereo headset so that I would have separate control of feeds to the left and right ears, again, largely for the purpose of merging my ears feed from the stage in. For the audio interface, I have a Behringer XR18. It's currently being used as part of my home audio setup since there's no road to be using it on. So again, this was the audio interface. It has 18 inputs, 16 of which are XLR, and then 6 aux outputs in addition to the main left-right, which also feeds to the phone's jack. From there, again, this was all being built into a rack, so I built a couple of panels to go on, or in order to wire everything through. So I will start from there. So on the front panel, we have 3 jacks. There's a 5-pin for the 5-pin headset input, a 4-pin male for a 4-pin headset input, which I never realized those connectors are reversed for 4 and 5-pin, and then a 4-pin female for connecting from a belt pack into this. So originally my process had been to basically feed out of the belt pack, strip out the 24 volt, and feed that into an audio interface. I moved to instead basically treating the interface connections as a headset instead, so that my belt pack did not have to be the last one in line. and I didn't have to worry about stripping out 24 volt because it's already not in the headset output. So each of these gets wired to an XLR male and an XLR female. The male being for signal coming from the jack, so in this case it would be a mic coming in from the headset, and the female being audio from the audio interface, which would be the same as the pins that would be going to your cans from the belt pack. Okay, so from there, I've got this 1/4 inch attached to the headset side, the feeding side of whichever one is being fed to my headset. Originally, I had tried to wire these together. However, that creates a short between like the negative on something. It ended with not getting audio on one ear. So I had to pick which headset was being used that day to plug in. In all honesty, I have not yet used the 4-pin side of this. Anyways, so I wanted to go to a 1/4 inch because I wanted to be able to feed it into the phone's jack here so that I would have an actual physical knob to control the overall level coming to my ears. So, again, all of this is just splitting off the mic and the cans, the headphone side of each headset, and then basically treating the same as a return or as an interface, I guess we could say, to and from the belt pack. So that's what those do, and those screws have come quite loose. On the second panel, so that would have been the front panel, that would have been on the side of the rack facing me during the show. On the back panel, I have 4 XLRs, all females, for taking a feed from elsewhere. So the first 2 of these were used for receiving my ears feed. The third one, actually I don't think I had permanent uses for 3 and 4. I had actually, for putting radio into the system, I had a separate cable. It's just a 1/8 inch to XLR, and most of the Motorola biscuits you'll run into have a little tab that you can open up where you can plug something like this in. So I would feed that into the system so I didn't have to also be listening to radio separately during the show. So again, just 4 of these that were being wired to the inputs. Then there's the time code part of it. So these 4 jacks, these 2 females and these 2 males, are all wired together back here. And the purpose was, first off, anytime you're dealing with time code, you pretty much, like, let's say you've got 2 consoles at front of house, or I just always find myself needing a 3-pin split, going one way or another depending on what's going on. So I just put 2 females, 2 males together so that whatever I'm doing, I know that I can make all 4 of these jacks share a connection, so I'm not looking around trying to find a split. There's always one in the rack. Those 2 go to both a male and a female XLR. Again, this is all wired together. And the purpose of that was so that, let's say I'm receiving time code from the stage. Plug it in here. So that is being fed into the audio interface as well as being popped out of one of these straight up to the console. If I want to feed it to 2 consoles, I have the ability to do that. I need to slow the fuck down. However, a lot of the time I will be, let's say I'm working on a song that is time-coded during the day. Instead of having to worry about popping out cables, popping new cables back in, with that interface already connected to Reaper, I am able to just play the track from Reaper and know that the wiring is already set up for it to go to the console and me not have to shuffle anything around, which is more beneficial on the side of I don't have to worry if I forgot to plug anything back in. Obviously, we're checking that during line check before our set starts, but one less point of failure. So, again, it'll just allowed everything to be more integrated without having to constantly swap wires back and forth. Beside that, I had 4 Ethernet or EtherCon connections that were just being fed to a switch. Again, 4 probably was overkill, but I figured it's better just have a few extras than not have enough on there because it kind of kills the point at that point. One of the things I do want to add to it is I'm wanting to add some outputs specifically so that I can redirect audio from my headset to the ears on stage. anytime that there might be some kind of emergency, something happening with automation. I've had one event where something went wrong with automation, and I didn't have a way to communicate directly with the artist to let them know they were about to step off into empty space. So I had to get front of house audio's attention and have him tell the artist, and it would have been much faster if I could have just pressed a button and been able to relay that directly. Because this thing does have MIDI control that you can mute and unmute channels or select scenes just by sending a MIDI note, I've set up so that on the console I can just press a button, and while I'm holding it, I can unmute a channel that will output to stage ears, and then once I release the button, it will again mute that channel so that I'm only speaking to the spot ops. And I think that pretty much covers all of what is being wired. So from here, I am going to move into the mix side of it. All right. So as far as the mix side is concerned, so I'm going to walk through, what was coming to my ears. So this is the file I had. It's slightly modified since I am currently using the interface to record with. But so on channels 1 and 2, I had my ears coming in. I had radio coming in on 3. Didn't use 4. Belt pack, so what was coming from the belt pack, what would have been going to directly to the headphones part of the headset. SMPTE, which I'll explain that in a little bit. And then feedback from my own microphone. Feedback is in hearing my own microphone. On the far right, I've got USB left and right. That would have been computer feed when I was programming with Reaper during the day before the show. So before I dive into all this, because I know I'm going to forget, I had 2 buses that were being used, and each bus is routed to one of the 6 auxiliary outputs on the Xair interface. Bus 1 was my microphone send, so out of this would be what would be feeding into the microphone portion of the headset cabling. So each spot meeting, I would just be dialing this up until it reached a level where they could hear me and I could hear them. Bus 6 was my timecode output. This is where I would be feeding out SMPTE into those 4 shared or 4 connected XLR jacks that I showed earlier. So there's the 2 aux outputs I was using. As far as my mix goes, and again, this is all going through main left right because main left right feeds into that headphone 1/4 inch, so that during show I have the ability to control my volume with a physical piece of hardware. So 2 major things to explain as far as how this was set up. First off is why SMPTE. Most of the time when I bring up that I had SMPTE feeding to my ears, people will cringe, and understandably so. It is a pretty terrible sound. However, the reason was so that I could know that timecode was rolling. And if we look at it here, if we go to the EQ part, I have it pretty solidly high shelved, so that I was just hearing those upper frequencies, and then I dialed it way down, so just so that I could hear it in the background and know it was present. And this actually saved my butt on a show. We had one show where I don't know if it was for human reasons or machine reasons, but we lost tracks mid-show. Obviously was not announced. There was no planning of it. It just went out. And because that was running in my ears, I immediately knew that it was time to take over manual. I didn't have to wait for a cue to be missed to catch on to that. I'm sure on the MA you can set up a notification for it, but it's there. So, and again, it was part of like a song start mental checklist too. Hearing that would mean knowing that I was rolling, and if I didn't, it meant that either timecode screwed up or my dumbass forgot the song doesn't have timecode. So hopefully usually the former, and hopefully usually neither. But anyways, so that is the reasoning for SMPTE in there. Again, super dialed back. Not something I actively want to be listening to. Just enough to know when it's gone. So then the belt pack part of it. So this is where it kind of got a little bit hairy. I had to try some things out to get this to work. So the reason that belt pack was being fed through this again was so that I could control the level of hearing myself versus hearing what was coming to me. Again, dealing with super long cable runs. Well, the problem, if I just cranked myself up and basically just be dialing up the mic for my headset. The issue you'd run into is that what you hear from the headset is the quote unquote mix of what those belt packs are making or are summing together. So by increasing your mic level, you're just going to blast your own ears out at the same time. So the first thing I tried was a inverse polarity thing where I took the mic signal, inverted it, and tried to add it back into the mix that I was hearing to cancel it out. Problem is, sound quality is not the same going straight into a dedicated audio interface as it is going into the audio interface, then back out of the audio interface into a comm set, which isn't built to have the cleanest preamps in the world, and then back into the audio interface. The signal is so different by that time that trying to do the cancellation that way, for anybody who's familiar with audio at all, it did not work. So what I went to instead was using compression. So for people who are not familiar with audio at all, compression, when applied to a single channel, basically just means you are limiting the, let's call it volume range, the dynamic range, but we'll say volume, of that channel. What you can do with a compressor, that is achieved by basically reducing the louder volumes to a lower level. What you can also do with a compressor is sidechain it, which means that the signal that is triggering how low the target channel is going is a separate channel. So you can have one channel spike up and cause a different channel to go down, and that's what I did. So on the compressor here, we see I've got the key source set as channel 9, so the source of what was triggering compression, which was my microphone. So what that meant is that every time I spoke, what was coming back from the belt pack to my ears would duck down. Now, a disadvantage would be that in doing so, I would not be able to hear somebody else talking to me while I am talking. So if I'm giving a longer-winded speech and someone's trying to talk to me, good chance I won't be able to hear them. However, in general, talking over each other isn't going to work out in any ways, and during the show is not of a high priority. It was worth the trade-off. It allowed me to, again, dial up the level that I'm sending out to the belt pack without having it rip out my ears. If I wanted to do that, I would have just turned up the volume knob. Little amount of SMPTE, side chaining my belt pack receive to my ears from my microphone, and those were kind of the bigger aspects of it, in addition to adding my ears and radio feeds in. So that's it as far as the mix aspect of it went. As far as what was going on Reaper, and all I want to show in here is just a little bit of what I was using Reaper for as far as routing inputs. You can figure that out on your own. Sorry, that sounded really like passive-aggressive. Wasn't supposed to be that at all. So what I had set up for my console was that every time a song start macro was fired, was that it would send out a MIDI note matching the page I was on, because each song had a different page. So I used that to send out a different MIDI note, and then I had a little Lua script in Reaper that would then use that MIDI note to figure out, first off, it would put a marker down, matched with the number of that MIDI note, and then it would match that number with a song title that had been stored in the script. And the purpose of that was so that while I am going back to review, check for any errors or whatever happened during the show, I can easily navigate to each song. So if I zoom out right now, I can quickly see, like, if I needed to get to Pull It Off, I can see that song started right here, or I fired that song right there. So that's what all the black markers are. Then I had one more MIDI note, that was dedicated to handling anytime there was an issue. And it was just a button I would hit on the console to add additional markers in here. They're all the same number. They're all labeled issue. But anytime there was an issue with a spot call that didn't go as intended, or if there was something that happened with programming, or just any kind of note that I wanted to make and to be able to quickly locate and review that later, rather than trying to write things down or whatever it was, that just allowed me to mark what had happened during that time, or mark that timestamp so that I could quickly and easily find it later. So that's it. That's all I really wanted to show as far as the digital side of this goes. So I forgot to show during the initial wiring part of all this. These are the notes I was going off of, just kind of brainstorming before a show. Um, if it's of use to anybody, sorry, my handwriting is kind of crap, but it explains the wiring coming out of the 5-pin headset and the various things it was going to. 5 to 4 pin, 5-pin breakout, splitting it into 2 XLR cables, same thing for 4-pin. And then how I broke out the X-Air stuff. And just as a reminder, it did turn out to be, this was accurate, that I could not wire the 5 and 4 pin together without it being an issue. So yeah, sorry my handwriting sucks, but maybe this is of use to anybody trying to do the same thing. So that's it for that. Hope it's helpful. Again, I know it's my way of overcomplicating everything. It works well for me. I like it. I don't expect it to be the maybe the best thing for anybody and everybody. But I just wanted to share it. On a more serious note, I do just want to say I hope everybody out there is staying safe, staying sane during quarantine. Hope you're all able to just be able to keep putting food on the table and keep your bills paid. I know it's not really an easy time for anybody right now, so just take care of yourselves, take care of each other. That's all I wanted to say. So best of wishes to everybody out there.